Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Super Tease video. And there's been a lot of discussion recently about an increase in influx of cheating in World of Warcraft, especially when it comes to botting, but also some very suspicious and fishy macros. And in today's video, we're going to be detectives, we're going to be sleuths, we're going to be going undercover to be able to find out how to detect when a player is using one of these programs or one of these macros, so you can see what the trends are, so you can right click, press that report button, and be a little bit more accurate in your assessments with this. So one notorious specialization for utilizing these types of mechanics is going to be the Elemental Shaman. And one of the first telltales that somebody might be botting, this isn't a guaranteed one, but it's a fairly good one, is they're probably going to have a cringe name. They're probably going to have a cringe name like this one right here that I'm running my mouse over. Probably, okay? The second one is going to be that they're likely in full blue gear because they've been banned 10 times on their previous accounts. And I inspected this player. You can go check out their armory. They're wearing a lot of blue gear, okay? And as an Elemental Shaman, with the way that some of these new macros and botting programs work, basically as an Elemental Shaman, you put Flame Shock up, which will proc instant cast Lava Bursts, but you want to be pressing Earth Shock when you don't have an instant cast Lava Burst. The bot, though, will always cast a Lava Burst before an Earth Shock, regardless of the situation, because it's more damage to do it, but it's like almost incalculable for a human to get that interaction. And one of the ways that it gets around hard casting is that it will non-stop jump. So you will see this character here. He will literally non-stop jump. And what is this doing for the Elemental Shaman? It is making it so that they never hard cast a spell, but they also never miss an instant Lava Burst proc. So they are maximizing their damage in between and min-maxing it. So this is a really good way to sort of initially detect if somebody is a bot, is their movement patterns. As an Ele Shaman, they are always going to jump the entire game, for the entire duration of the game. Now, I know some people are really they jump a lot, a lot of the times with these players that are using these programs, they're not very good, so they don't go into good positions while they're jumping. They're just kind of aimlessly jumping in random spots on the map because they don't know what they're doing, and they're running these third-party programs. But if they're jumping like this, there's a decent chance that they could be botting, especially if they're not casting any other spells the entire game, right? I think we've seen this player cast Lightning Lasso, but they're not doing any hexes. They're not doing literally anything. It's just Flame Shock and Lava Burst and jumping, and they're doing nothing else. Another way to detect it would be as if they're completely standing still. That means there's a lower skill level than even this player is, although maybe their bot is more sophisticated, that they can actually stand still and it doesn't use any hard casted Lava Burst to lower their overall DPS. But that would be another trend. So movement is certainly something to really take into account when you're trying to figure out if a player is using one of these third-party programs. Another one is timing of cooldowns or timing of defensives. So you can see the Shaman uses Astral Shift at 50% no matter what. It's going to be at the same percent on a script, because it's running on a script, to use defensives at certain margins. When they get incredibly low, I think it was around 10%, if they're lower than 10%, it will use Burrow. And it won't use it for any reason at any other time whatsoever in terms of defensive cooldowns. So if you're noticing that consistently, we got 6 rounds to play together, right? So at first I was like, kind of sketchy for the first couple of rounds, but by the time we got to round 5 and 6, which I'm going to skip to see the really, good ways to detect whether or not somebody's using one of these programs, it was like, yeah, okay, this is getting a little bit too obvious for me. And they've still, at this point, if you've been monitoring them, not casted a single spell. They've only been jumping Flame Shock and Lava Burst. You should also note that they have not used Wind Shear and not used Grounding Totem. And that is because this guy's bot, at least in particular, has been set up to only interrupt Polymorph and only interrupt Polymorph on the healer. It can detect which person you're targeting it on. So I'm going to skip to the last round of this one here so that you guys can see what I'm talking about, because in the last round I was really able to test this out, because it wouldn't be consistent for a player to never not ground a sheep that's casted on a DPS without knowing, or not sheared a sheep just because you can't keep track of who I'm targeting and where this is going the entire game perfectly, and always use shear before ground. That's another thing. It'll always be one of these abilities before the other, not the other way around. But if they're out of range, they'll use ground. There's common trends that are way too consistent that a player is just not going to be able to do. And especially if the player is in full blues and just starting, You wouldn't think they'd be capable of, reserving their interrupt for that exact specific moment every time meticulously without error, in terms of where Polymorph is being casted. So here in the final round is where I really put the Elemental Shaman theory to the test here. So we've identified that they nonstop jump. They don't cast any other spells. They only use their defensive cooldowns at certain percent margins, 50 and 10% with this guy. In the program they're running, and interrupts and grounding totems are completely scripted out to specific moments in the game. And like I said, it's when you cast Polymorph on a healer. So when I move in behind the pillar in a moment here, I think that I cast a sheep on a DPS, and you'll see that the shaman does not shear, the shaman does not ground, but as soon as I'm targeting the priest, you'll see that shear and ground will be utilized, right? So you must think like, hey, maybe I'm casting sheep on the healer here. No ground, no shear. I target the priest, ground. He's out of range of shear, so he doesn't shear first. Now we're going to target the priest again, cast sheep. He's going to shear it. When we get sheared, it's usually at the same point in the cast. He walls at 50% like always, even though he's got sacrifice up. That would be, enough damage reduction to survive in that moment. And now we cast sheep again. And this time we get it because there's no grounding and there's no shear. And, he's not good enough to move in range to thunderstorm me because the bot can't do that. But he could have done that if he was actually a good player and not using a third-party program. We're going to cast sheep again. Shears on cooldown, grounds on cooldown. So again, no thunderstorm, no extra utility, only what the bot can provide to them. We get a stun here. Now I'm casting Polymorph on like full DR, right? We're going to test this out. This is a full DR Polymorph, wind sheared. There would be no reason to shear that. He's already seen the priest get sheep 3 times. Why would you shear a sheep that's only on the healer, burrow at 10%, defensive cooldown at the exact moment here in this game? Why would you shear a sheep that's already on full DR? There's no reason to shear a sheep, and they won't shear anything else. They won't ground anything else. I can use Ray of Frost, Flurry procs. I can use my hardest hitting attacks. They will never use grounding. It will only use grounding if I cast sheep on the healer. Here are the shaman trinkets, and he actually missed it. And I think it might be because his trinket isn't botted, because he trinketed right at the end of the stun that I put him into. But this was like one of the first wind shears that was actually missed in this game. And it was a bit surprising to see that it was missed. We're just dumping ice lances in over and over and over and over, but you can start to see the trends of this, right? So those are like the main ways to start detecting. I would say it's, again, usually it's going to be Ele Shamans. I think this is like the most notorious one for doing it. Another kind of low key one is if you're noticing that you can't ground any of their stuns, and you can't fade immune any of their stuns, because there's some really, really nasty macros out now that will like only stun after these immunity effects are over, even if you're spamming the button. And we need Blizzard to crack down on this. This is the main reason I'm making this video, is so that you can detect this type of stuff, report this type of stuff. We got to get this type of stuff out of the game because it's definitely frustrating to be dealing with. And there was a massive ban wave also recently, which is likely why these characters are coming in now with full blues. Again, I don't recommend, talking trash in the comms or whatever, whenever you think that this is possible. Just report, move on, because there might be a chance that they're not, right? This is not 100% bulletproof, that this is going to be a way to detect this type of stuff, but it's a really good, identifying marks to send in a report to get it looked into. So what did we learn, right? We learned cringe name. We're going to be more likely than not. Movement. They're either standing still and not moving at all and doing like insane damage, or they're nonstop jumping because of the interactions that it has with their program or their macro or whatever, so that they're maximizing their damage. They're going to be nonstop jumping in those instances. Their defensive cooldowns are going to be scripted to certain percents. So you're always going to see a defensive cooldown at 50%, or always see a defensive cooldown at 10%, depending on what class it is. But for Ellie's, I'd say 50 and 10 is pretty standard. And now their interrupts and their grounds are scripted to only one specific scenario. So in this instance, it will shear a poly on the healer, even if it's on full DR, because the program is garbage and can only detect that a sheep's being casted on the healer and not whether or not it's on DR. And the player, if they were this skilled at calculating where these polymorphs were going, would likely use the rest of their kit, like Thunderstorm, to knock me away on my casts as well. So there's some inconsistencies there. You can't play that perfectly in terms of deflecting crowd control and then not use the rest of the kit that isn't programmable. It's just too obvious at this point. So we'll say I sent in a report for this one, but I wanted to give you guys a video to kind of look this over, so that you can more accurately put your reports in, because there is a lot of also false accusation when it comes to this type of stuff. So again, don't type to other players, don't be mean, and that type of stuff in game. It's not, just don't do that type of stuff. Just send a report, move on. and let Blizzard do the rest of this here. But it's definitely something that is stepping up. I think there's a lot of people talking about it, but I just want to bring some attention to it, give you guys some detective maneuvers so you can more properly assess whether or not this is happening to you. And other than that, if you like this type of content, news, engaging, entertaining, educational content, make sure to smash that subscribe button. Maybe you've checked out from World of Warcraft at this point. I think that subscribing to a channel like this to keep tabs on it, so if it seems like it's worth your time in the future, is also a great idea. But other than that, thank you very much for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.